Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami.
This particular mic doesn't take sound in from the sides, it only takes it in
From the front.
the very front.
Okie dokie. Continuing with teachings from Buddhadhamma, and we'll be starting with section C on page 903, deriving the greatest benefit from systems of preconditions. So continuing where Ajahn Karuṇadhammo left off yesterday. A lot of this section is generally on the topic of finding happiness in work, and a lot of the examples seem to be mostly referring to different work in the lay life, but certainly easily extrapolated here to the monastery, because we do plenty of work here as well that's in the same vein. So, a frequently asked question in the modern age is how wholesome desire functions in the domain of work. The term chanda can be simply translated as pleasure, liking, or delight. Take, for example, a job interview during which one is asked, "Do you like this kind of work?" The term like here is ambiguous. One person may answer, "I like it," but imply that he likes the good salary or the fact that the work requires little exertion and provides a lot of free time. This is one kind of liking. Another person may reply, "I like it," on the grounds that the work conforms to her skills and that it is beneficial and constructive to society. The terms like and desire encompass both craving, tanha, and wholesome enthusiasm, chanda. For this reason, it is important to clarify how one uses these terms. It requires discernment to understand the real meaning of the question, "Do you like this kind of work?" Which is, does this work fit your skills, and do you see the value of this work? It is not a matter of only liking the work because of a high income or an opportunity to be lazy and have lots of time off, which stems from selfishness and craving. If we have wholesome enthusiasm, we truly love our work. Because we recognize its value, we see how it benefits society and helps develop our nation. If the social benefit of work is not clearly evident, or if one does not recognize the wider value of one's work, and yet the work is required, one can generate wholesome enthusiasm with the attitude that the work is valuable for self-development and leads to improvement in our own lives. One aspect of work is that it is a domain for personal growth. Every kind of work or activity, whether it involves a task that we enjoy or not, is an opportunity for personal development. The more difficult is the task, the greater is the opportunity to train, to sharpen skills, and to increase intelligence. If one can summon wholesome desire and generate a wish to train, one will enjoy even those things previously found unpleasant, and one will delight even in difficult work. The more challenging the task, the more one gains. By the time the task is complete, one has passed through an extensive period of self-development. Our daily work and activities take up the most amount of time in our lives, approximately 8 hours, or 1/3 of each day. The remaining 16 hours or so are taken up by sleeping or traveling, or of simply being fatigued. For this reason, one needs to make the most out of these 8 hours of productive activity. If one needs to force oneself to do this work, then one is in trouble. These 8 hours will be wasted, and one's life will be filled with unhappiness. It is thus vital to generate wholesome desire, to recognize the importance of having love for one's work. One can tell oneself that by having such love, one will develop oneself, develop one's capabilities, develop one's ability to solve problems, develop wisdom, and develop the mind. One will grow in endurance, energy, self-restraint, mindfulness, and concentration. This wholesome enthusiasm will bestow meaning to one's work and will increase one's happiness. When engaging in displeasurable work, the mind is stifled, without a sense of relief. This mental constriction and confinement is suffering indeed. The mind then gets caught in a cycle of such suffering. When the mind finds a way out of this impasse, one feels relieved and happy. Therefore, whenever one is experiencing difficulty, one should generate such wholesome desire. Then every activity will be endowed with such zeal, and as mentioned above, one will recognize that at the very least one has a valuable opportunity to develop oneself. Most often when working, one must encounter other people. If one is not plagued by stifling thoughts or emotions, these encounters are also an opportunity for self-training. One can train, for example, in speech. What sort of speech is effective, non-offensive, and conducive to friendship and cooperation? All such activities are opportunities for training. Work may be defined as those tasks necessary to accomplish. Wholesome enthusiasm is the desire to perform these tasks, along with a desire to understand the details of this work. The desire to act is thus inherently an aspect of training and of study. True training is comprised of the desire to know and the desire to act. By generating this desire to know and act, the essence of training has been reached. The desire to train, to learn, and to act is the same as the desire to understand. When willingly engaged in a task, one trains oneself and is engaged in study. Both formal learning and formal work are aspects of training, because in both cases one is improving one's life. If one practices correctly, one's entire life will be a form of training, of self-development. Technically speaking, one can use the term chanda in reference to all activities. It does not simply refer to one's work. There are two aspects to this term. One, chanda as a desire for a natural state of completion. Here, one wishes for all things with which one is engaged, with which one is engaged to be well and in good order, and to reach a state of natural completeness and fulfillment. 2, chanda as a desire to accord with causes and conditions. One wishes for success directly in accord with causes and conditions. For example, every profession has a natural objective. The objective of the medical profession, for instance, is to cure people from illness. The objective of the teaching profession is to instill goodness and knowledge in children or in pupils. We should ask ourselves what the direct purpose of our specific individual profession is. Government work, and the work by state institutions, for example, requires a clear objective. Before beginning a job, we should clearly investigate its objectives, and we then ask ourselves whether we agree with and approve of them. When we decide to then undertake the task, we can attend accurately to these objectives. And through our enthusiasm and determination, we seek to bring about results consistent with these objectives. This is chanda. As for a salary or financial remuneration, this is a matter belonging to the system of preconditions. With wholesome desire and wisdom, one sees that money is a support for devoting oneself fully to one's work in order to fulfill its objective, without needing to worry about how one will earn one's livelihood or seek some other form of occupation. Although one abides by a system of conventions, one understands and benefits from it. When people possess wholesome enthusiasm and understand the true purpose of their work and the nature of the agreed-upon terms, the system will not be seen simply as a way to force people to work. One will discern that it aims to promote wholesome desire so that people can commit themselves fully to their work and be freed from financial worries. If people have wholesome desire, are determined to perform their work in order to fulfill its true purpose, have a love for this form of success, and receive an adequate financial recompense, they and their families will abide in well-being. This correct, virtuous way of practice provides people with two kinds of happiness. First, they derive happiness directly from their work, knowing that they have attended to it correctly. Second, they feel assured by the wages or salary, knowing that it will be a support to further dedicate themselves to their activities. They are pleased that their work progresses well, and they are confident that their enthusiastic efforts lead to results consonant with the work's true objective, to the well-being of an institution or the nation, in a smooth and lasting way. This is how a system based on wholesome desire operates. So that's that section on wholesome desire, wholesome work, finding wholesome motivations in whatever work we're doing, even if it's just a job for paying the bills. There's ways that it can be held to maximize the benefit inside, so that there's a wholesome enthusiasm or enjoyment of it, as long as it's in accord with right livelihood. And as everybody knows, the aspect of work in the monastery is something that was not shied away from in our tradition. Wat Pa Pong, lots of work in the early days. Chithurst, huge amounts of work in the early days. Even here, we had plenty of. There's still plenty of work here, but even in the early days, the midnight retaining wall party that we had, putting up this retaining wall here way into the late hours of the night, early hours of the morning, with floodlights and Plern making tea.
Yeah, and I flew to Thailand the next day.
I forgot that part. Yeah. So, this kind of work can be seen as a burden, or it can be seen as just a chance to offer support and offer our skills and our time for a good cause, and be held in that kind of positive way. Ajahn Chah would even refer, I think, to the just watching the mind state when one is doing simple tasks like doing the dishes. Whether a person can be silent in doing one's duty, but be filled with annoyance and irritation at having to be washing up pots and pans and dishes. So whatever work situation we're in, always a good opportunity to not complain, but also watch the state of the mind. And if the mind is moving towards just trying to get through this so that I can get on to the real practice, then looking at the painfulness that creates, and maybe reframing it in a way of looking at the good that it's doing, remembering how it's contributing to the welfare of the community. It's always a good way to refresh the mind. Like, I guess, the work task yesterday that I missed when you all took a little break from your retreat and went up and moved tanks. Nice opportunity to spend some time with each other, engaging in some wholesome activity.
Yeah, Nick said he normally doesn't like digging, but the fact that everybody was there together made it super enjoyable.
Yeah. Group support. So, keeping all that in mind. as I was reading this, I was coming up with all sorts of thoughts of what I could have looked at to read from suttas and things on right livelihood and all that kind of stuff, which I couldn't think of a word. I got back to my kuti, was looking at this late last night, and I think, well, what can I bring from the suttas to read? And I wasn't coming up with anything. And unfortunately, it was just now that I was thinking of that, so I don't have time to quickly research that. But I did just pick a few other kinds of readings that I thought might be tangentially related in some way that could still be fun to read. One of them is a section from the Great Disciples of the Buddha, Nyanaponika Thera and Helmuth Hecker, their collection of stories about great disciples of the Buddha, and was thinking about Anathapindika and his, not only his generosity, which of course stands out, but his taking delight in setting up Jeta's Grove for the Buddha, and how he went about doing that. And so I thought I'd read a little bit of a selection from this. The actual stories, there's a little bit of it in the Samyutta Nikaya, but a lot of it is from Vinaya texts, which I didn't go back to the original, just will read the paraphrasing that is in the book here. And the section on Anathapindika in this book, which is a great book if people haven't taken a look at it, it's very, very nicely put together on the great disciples of the Buddha. But this section on Anathapindika does begin with his first encounter with the Buddha and how he came to do that, which I won't go into detail, but I'll start with where he is just about to go to meet the Buddha for the first time after hearing about him from a relative or a friend, I can't remember which, brother-in-law. And it's the night before he goes to visit the Buddha. And he's woken up several times in kind of anticipation of this meeting, and has finally gotten up the nerve, after being somewhat doubtful whether he should or not, finally gotten up the nerve to go and visit the Buddha after a spirit comes to visit him and urges him to continue to go and see the Buddha. So he starts out early in the morning before dawn to make his way there. And this is on page 338 of that book. And so through the rest of the night, Anathapindika walked resolutely on. After a while, he saw in the misty dawn a figure walking silently back and forth. Anathapindika stopped. Then the figure called to him in an indescribably melodious voice. "Come, Sudatta." Anathapindika was startled at being addressed in this manner, for no one there addressed him by his given name. He was known only as Anathapindika, and besides, he was unknown to the Buddha and had come unexpectedly. Now he was certain that he was in the presence of the Enlightened One. Overwhelmed by the gravity of the encounter, he fell at the Master's feet and asked him in a stammering voice, "Did the Blessed One sleep well?" With his answer to this conventional question, the Buddha gave Anathapindika a glimpse of his real stature. Always indeed he sleeps well, the Brahman who is fully quenched, who does not cling to sensual pleasures, cool at heart without acquisitions, having cut off all attachments, having removed care from the heart. The peaceful one indeed sleeps well, for he has attained peace of mind. Then the Blessed One, leading Anathapindika step by step, spoke to him of giving, of virtue, of the heavens, of the perils, vanity, and defiling nature of sensual pleasures, of the benefits of renunciation. When he saw that Anathapindika was ready in heart and mind, pliable, unobstructed, uplifted, and serene, he explained to him the teaching that is unique to the enlightened ones, the Four Noble Truths of suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path. With that, the dust-free, stainless eye of truth, Dhammacakku, opened for Anathapindika. Anathapindika. Whatever has the nature of arising, all that has the nature of cessation. Anathapindika had understood the truth of the Dhamma, had overcome all doubts, and it was without any wavering. Certain in his mind, he was now self-dependent in the Master's dispensation. He had realized the path and fruit of stream entry. He then invited the Blessed One for a meal the next day at the home of his brother-in-law, and the Master accepted. After the meal, Anathapindika asked the Buddha if he might build a monastery for the order in his hometown of Savatthi. The Buddha answered, "The enlightened ones love peaceful places." "I understand, O Master, I understand," answered Anathapindika, overjoyed with the acceptance of this offer. When Anathapindika returned to Savatthi, he encouraged the people along the route to receive the Buddha in a respectful manner. Once he arrived in Savatthi, he immediately searched for an appropriate location for the monastery. The site had to be neither too close to the city nor too far. It should not be overrun by people in the daytime or noisy at night. It should be accessible to devoted visitors and also fit for those bent on seclusion. At last, in the chain of hills surrounding the city, he found a beautiful forest glade, ideal for the purpose. This was Jetavana, Jeta's grove, a glade belonging to Prince Jeta, a son of King Pasenadi. Anathapindika visited Prince Jeta in his palace and asked if the forest were for sale. The prince answered that he would not sell it even for the appropriate price of 18 million gold coins. I will give you that much right now," replied Anathapindika, but they were not able to come to terms and went to an arbitrator. The arbitrator ruled that the price should amount to as many gold coins of the 18 million as could be laid next to each other on the land, and on this basis of an agreement of sale was drawn up. Anathapindika brought many carts filled with gold coins and had the coins spread out upon the site. Finally, only one small patch of ground at the entrance remained bare. He gave instructions for more gold to be brought, but Prince Jeta announced that he was prepared to build a mighty gate and tower on that spot at his own expense. This imposing bastion and gate protected the monastery from the outside world, shielding it from the noises of the road and emphasizing the dividing line between the sacred and the mundane. Anathapindika then spent another 18 million for buildings and furnishings. He built individual cells, a meeting hall, a dining hall, storerooms, walkways, latrines, wells, and lotus ponds for bathing, as well as a large surrounding wall. Thus the forest glade was transformed into a monastery and stood apart as a religious sanctuary. To honor both parties to its establishment, the texts always refer to it by two names, Jeta's Grove and Anathapindika's Monastery. When all the preparations had been completed, the Buddha and his monks came to Savatthi to take up residence at the new monastery. On their arrival, Anathapindika invited them for a meal, after which he asked the Buddha, "How should I proceed with the offering of this Jetavana?" "You may dedicate it to the Sangha of the Four Quarters, present and future." And so Anathapindika did. Then the Buddha expressed his appreciation to him in the following verses. "They ward off cold and heat and beasts of prey from there, and creeping things and gnats and rains in the wet season. When the dreaded hot wind rises, that is warded off. To meditate and obtain insight in a shelter and at ease, a dwelling place is praised by the awakened one as chief gift to an order. Therefore, a wise man looking to his own weal should have dwelling places built, so that learned ones can stay therein. To these food and drink, raiment and lodgings, he should give to the upright with mind purified. Then these will teach him Dhamma, dispelling every ill. He, knowing the Dhamma, here attains Nibbana, cankerless." The alms meal for the monks was followed by a sumptuous celebration for the laity with gifts for everyone. This cost another 18 million. So altogether, Anathapindika spent 54 million on the headquarters for the order. Therefore, the Buddha declared him to be the foremost patron of the Sangha. So I thought that was just kind of a nice reminiscence of Anathapindika's, not only his generosity, but his hard work, and that upon meeting the Buddha first, the first thing that happened on the first meeting was that the Buddha gave him instructions to the point where Anathapindika, obviously ripe for understanding the Dhamma, became a stream enterer. And I think it's just good to remember that it wasn't at that point that Anathapindika just sort of said, okay, thanks, and then left. But was so moved and inspired that he offered and oversaw the construction in all of its details. Not only the money that he provided, but the planning and building and supervising of Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery, and the amount of work that must have taken, but obviously with a lot of heart and joy in what it would provide, one of the greatest gifts to the Sangha, a place where people can practice at ease and realize the fruits of the training and the practice. So just good thing to remember when we're involved in our daily activities. I'll leave it to...
Yeah, I have a question. In the suttas, there's and repeatedly that the Buddha's making comments about monastics delaying work and going to hell, as it brought a drug to hell. What's he trying to say there?
Yeah, I know what kind of passages you're talking about, and I guess when I read that, I take it a bit differently in that, when he uses words like, delighting in work or things like that is one of those things to avoid. I take it as more like a habitual compulsion that takes one because one is too restless to engage in practice on a regular basis or more formal practice. But I don't take that as any indication, because you can see it in all sorts of other suttas where the Buddha chides monks for letting their hut fall apart, and not attending to it, and looking after each other, looking after the property and all the guidelines about how to maintain it. So I think the way I read that, understand that is when it becomes a compulsion and as a way to avoid some of the more aspects of the meditation training.
It's a refuge in a sense.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, is taking refuge in work, basically being able to ask yourself, would I be okay if there wasn't any of this work? And if the answer is no, then you might be taking refuge in work.
In the actual activity. But then when there is the work to do, to participate with great delight in it.
Because obviously Lord Liam's, not sort of going to a bad destination. And he's, he said things like, well, if you think of it as work, you're already suffering. So it's the way it's held.
That's kind of, I've always found that exemplified. I don't know the Thai language at all, but I've heard several times the equivalent of, or the Thai term for work and fun are the same thing, or close. Yan. I remember also a recollection once when we had a group of workers building the yurts, and they were obviously people who knew each other, family, or not necessarily a family, but friends, all Hispanic fellows who who and we were kind of working not side by side, but on the huts at the same time, and I think it was Ajahn Jodipalo who noticed that the Westerners were kind of grumbling and straining and not having a very good time with the hard work, and that all of the hired workers who knew each other and were all just kind of talking and chatting and singing and enjoying themselves as a group as they were doing all the hard work. It's just sort of like noticing same work, same conditions, but just a whole different attitude of how to hold it and be with it and enjoy it.
Found something?
I did. I was thinking of Sariputta, and said, among the bhikkhus, Sariputta was outstanding as one who helped others. In the Devadaha Sutta, the Buddha himself said of his great disciple, Sariputta Bhikkhus is wise and a helper of his fellow monks. The commentary and explanation of these words refers to a traditional distinction among the ways of helping others. Blah, 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 blah. But Sariputta is a helper in two ways, being by giving material help, by giving help in the Dhamma. He said the elder did not go in alms round in the early morning hours as the other bhikkhus did. Instead, when they had all gone, he walked around the entire monastery grounds, and wherever he saw an unswept place, he swept it. Wherever refuse had not been removed, he threw it away. Where furniture, such as beds and chairs or earthenware, had not been properly arranged, he put them in order. He did this so that the non-Buddhist ascetics who might visit the monastery would not see any disorderliness and speak in contempt of the bhikkhus. Then he used to go to the hall for the sick, and having spoken consoling words to the patients, he would ask them about their needs.